This is the Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski.
Featuring defense attorney, Hidden Killers daily contributor, and host of the Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Motta.
The case against Richard Allen continues to get more and more dramatic by the week. This week not being any different whatsoever. Now in question, Judge Gull and some of her findings, some of her ways that she's been conducting this case up in question and going all the way to the Indiana Supreme Court. Here to discuss some of these filings and what exactly is going on, because it is a convoluted mess some days when you're trying to decipher this. Bob Motta, the defense attorney, the podcast Defense Diaries. Bob, you are on this one all the time. What is new with these filings, and where are things going here with Judge Gull and her involvement in this case, or maybe lack thereof, depending on what happens?
So, hey, Tony, how you doing, man? Yeah, it's a very active case. It went from not much happening prior to September to full speed ahead into crazy world. So I think when we last spoke, I'm trying to remember what the last thing is. So many things have happened. I think that it had been that I was in there on Halloween, right? Mm-hmm. And Brad, Rozzi and Baldwin had filed their pro bono appearances, had showed up in court. Judge had a little, I wouldn't call it a hearing. She had kind of a session in court where she basically let Rozzi say his piece and then instructed Richard Allen, I understand what your desires are with respect to these two gentlemen representing you, but I just can't do it. I found that they've been grossly negligent in their representation of you, and I can't allow them to do it.
Sure.
So that was that. And then we end up getting, in the last week since we spoke, 2 petitions filed. And oddly enough, they're not filed by either Richard Allen's new counsel, which are Scremin and Lebrato, and it was also not filed by his old counsel, either Allen's old attorneys, Baldwin and Rozzi. Neither of them prepared these petitions. It's an extraordinary remedy, and just kind of in layman's terms, what it means is that lawyers are going to a higher court, in this case, the Supreme Court of Indiana, and asking them to step in and order the judge to either do something or to not do something.
Yeah.
And so the first one that was filed by 3 lawyers, 3 friends of the court, will entered limited appearances, like they don't represent Richard Allen in the underlying case in the trial. All right. So I don't want people to be confused by the fact that we've got additional defense bar attorneys that are stepping up because they perceived that there's been a wrong that's happened here in this case. And the defense bar is, pretty tight knit in general, when they're looking at it from afar, or in this case from a near in Indiana. And they, like I said, they think that something has gone awry. You've got people that are willing to donate their time and resources and jump into the fight. So you had these 3 attorneys, and they prepared the first writ, which was essentially attacking the judge's management of the docket, the court docket. Okay. Because the beef has been that she seals documents, she removes documents that have been filed by the defense, like in their entirety. She's basically trying the case in the dark, is what the long and the short of it is, as opposed to, as the public goes, we have the right to see all filings in a case. That doesn't mean if there's evidence that's attached or exhibits that are attached to these petitions that contains inflammatory type photographs, or something that might pose a danger to a witness or something like that, they will file it confidentially, meaning that the public cannot gain access to it. But as far as just regular pleadings and filings, the writ and the petitioners who drafted it, their position is that she violated the public records for courts access rules, and that, they're very strict. The attorney who actually drafted it is kind of the wizard of those rules. She knows the rules backward and forward. Her name is Maggie Smith. And she basically pointed out every violation of the rules that the judge has made with respect to the docket and pointed them all out in pretty concise fashion. And I mean, there's a lot of problems. And I mean, you and I talked about the fact that, I can look at that docket and have no idea what's going on in that case. And that's not how it's supposed to be.
Why would
even
she,
people,
I guess, why? I mean, if you were to speculate on why she would do this, I mean, it seems like it opens up the door to all of these problems that we're seeing right now.
It really does. And I don't have an answer for it. I really don't. I'm certainly not of the position that Judge Gull is trying to specifically railroad Richard Allen. I don't think she's in cahoots with the prosecution or anything like that. So if you take that possibility out of the equation, it leaves me wondering why myself. I don't know. I mean, it's one thing to keep, like I said, sensational or, graphic photographs out of the public eye because you don't want that before trial, because that does hurt the defendant really more than anybody else. You obviously don't want the victims' families to have to see that kind of stuff be out published in the public either. But, in terms of like the legal process, I mean, the defendant, Richard Allen, who is of concern to the judge. So, I mean, that would explain that. But as far as pleadings and filings that have taken place, and the fact that she doesn't prepare court orders in a timely fashion, and that she doesn't set things for hearings, that there's been pending motions and responses by the state that are just floating out there. It's puzzling, man. And you're exactly right. The end result is you get this.
Is it
this
just
nightmare,
sloppy work? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, maybe nothing more to read into than just somebody who maybe doesn't like their job much anymore.
The ironic thing is she has made like 3 runs to get on the bench, not through the election route, but by, trying to get appointed. And she's been found to not qualify. I think all 3 times. You would think if that's your goal, which clearly it is, based on the fact that she's done it 3 times, that you would not have a docket that looks like this on the biggest case in Indiana history. It's puzzling to me. I don't know what she's doing, to be honest with you. I really don't have an answer. It's very bizarre to me, and then so that thing is pending. So that gets filed. The judge has to go. The attorney general then has the option to represent her in the action. The attorney general declined to represent her in the action. And so she had to go out and get private counsel. So she hired a couple of attorneys to handle that. So, and that actually happened. That was filed the day of the hearing on the 31st, but I don't think that we talked about it.
No.
Okay. So, because I think when we spoke on it, I wasn't even aware that it had been filed, because when you file something with the Supreme Court, it takes a minute for it to hit because it has to be approved to be filed by the Supreme Court. And I'm not going to bore your listeners with the kind of the legal mumbo jumbo of it all in terms of the argument, but it's an interesting motion. Frankly, I anticipate that will be granted. That writ of mandamus will be granted, and the Supreme Court will direct her to put everything on the docket.
Want to listen ad-free? Want advance access to all of our interviews before anyone else?
Become a True Crime Today Premium Plus subscriber on Apple Podcasts.
You get every episode commercial free,
so you can binge on true crime
until you can binge no more.
Search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts now, or go to our podcast page and sign up now.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast next.